you. So based on the challenges that you've both specified for farmers, I'd like to actually turn to Mark, because Mark, your company, Certis Belkim, it produces both conventional and biocontrol plant protection products. So, you're interested in both of them being used by the farmers. But a decade ago, you decided to help farmers adopt integrated pest management through your Growing Through the Future program. So maybe you can, first of all, just to make sure everybody listening knows, tell us what is integrated pest management and tell us a bit about your program and what the benefits are that farmers have derived from working with you on this program and integrating IPM.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you also for the invitation to participate, and hi everybody online. Just to sort of take a bit of a backward step, some of you won't have heard of us as a company, so we're mainly focused in Europe and the diversity of European crops. We're a specific crop protection company, and as Kristen just said, we're heavily investing in both chemical and biological crop protection in as many crops as we can manage. In terms of the size of the business, we're about 800 million in sales, and about 750 people spread across about 35 different countries. Of that sale revenue, about 80% is coming from chemical crop protection and about 20% from biologicals, which is a significant proportion. And also, when we take into account that commitment translates into our R&D, meaning regulatory and development projects, about 50% of those projects are also biological. So we've made a real strategic commitment to move into this years ago, 25 years ago. In terms of our belief, our approach, just to try and sort of illustrate that on a slide, we really believe in the concept of integrated pest management, or integrated crop management, as sometimes referred. If you wanted a definition, I think Christopher just gave a very good description, that this involves everything that's available to think about cultural control, crop rotation, soil health, variety choice, but also then chemical and biological crop protection options. I think the definition I like the most is probably of IPM is the use of all available tools in an appropriate way, and in fact where digital has an increasing role to play. Linked again to what you've heard already, we need more biocontrols in general, and partly because of chemical resistance, so some pests and diseases and weeds developing resistance to the chemicals that we're using. As you heard also from Christopher, we see a significant reduction in the availability of chemical control for various reasons, both regulatory and financial. Again, to repeat, crop pests and diseases continue to increase, and some of that is to do with climate change for sure. Some of it is to do with crops being grown in situations which exposes them to bigger pest and disease increase. And certainly we see where some of the chemical solutions have been removed, we see more pests and diseases picking up. And finally, again, to repeat, we see an increasing demand from the food chain. This started, I looked back, I think Tesco's Nature's Choice was created in 1995 as one of the first supermarkets that really started specifying what crop protection products were used on the produce that they were selling. And increasingly that has developed to include, as you already heard, residues and residue management. So IPM is our sort of key focus, and an integral part of IPM has to be biocontrol. Partly, as you heard, because we're losing chemistry, but also because biocontrol presents, in many ways, a very different and good way of controlling pests and diseases. Next slide, please. So just to give you a flavor of what that looks like, our most advanced program, as Kristen just mentioned, just over 12 years ago, and there's a Spanish theme to this webinar, just over 12 years ago in Spain, we started working on the program. Pedro Quansona, I think, is on the call today, to really try and help farmers manage these problems. And it was particularly focused on protected vegetables, but in the one hand, trying to control the pest in the most effective way, already against the background of chemical reduction, but at the same time, as we heard, to try to restrict or lower chemical residue limits as that was demanded through the food chain. And that program, and you've got a few examples on the screen in front of you, that program has developed now into multiple crops. And what you see is really a menu of crop protection and how to produce that crop from start to finish. The big picture here is California peppers, but as you see on the left, we have multiple programs doing basically the same thing, and where we're very specific in assessing with the farmer and with the food chain when is the best time to apply each of these products. In general, we tend to apply chemistry at the beginning of the crop and biological crop protection towards the end of the crop, but there are some exceptions. And in general, the program is developing in a very collaborative way. We certainly don't have all the answers. We would like to bring more and more biological products to the market, but we need help from farmers and the production chain and exporters to make sure that we're addressing those problems as they come up. Next slide, please. Just to illustrate some results, and I think, Marcus, you can put all of the bullets up at the same time to save time. This is just one example from California peppers from 2022. An important test of these programs is that disease and pest control is at least as good as a conventional strategy relying potentially on more chemical control. We see, as a result, about anywhere between a 50 to 60% reduction in conventional crop protection, which is augmented or replaced by biologicals. And one of the key targets from the original program was to reduce residues, and we get a significant reduction in chemical residue on the final product. We're also using Cornell University's EIQ, or Environmental Impact Coefficient, to assess the environmental impact of these integrated programs, and the average over that 10 or 12 year period is about a 50% reduction. And finally, which is critical for the farmer producing these crops, is we see a net profit increase. IPM, biological control, tends to be more difficult to use, and that requires a lot more management time in many cases to work out technically how to use the product, but it's important at the end that we see, and the farmer sees, an increase in profit as a result. Next slide, please. So that example I just used, or those examples I just used, started in Spain, and now we're replicating those across the rest of Europe in many, many different crops. We also see specific examples which are not really program developed, but really just simple replacements. And I've used a few examples here on the slide. In all of these cases, the predominant standard control method has been a chemical one, in some cases for many, many years. And as I've mentioned, in many situations, and as you heard from Christopher, chemical products being removed from the market and lost from the market for different reasons. And in all cases, companies like us trying to find a way to continue controlling those pests and diseases with other methods. And in all of these cases, if you flip to the next slide, please, Marcus. In all of these cases, there is a very viable, there is a very viable biological crop protection solution. In the case of nematicides, those that use it will know that we have both a sort of fumigant approach to nematode control as well as a chemical crop treatment within the crop at the beginning of the crop. In those cases, we have quite a range of biological nematode control methods that are viable, they work, they're economical, they are more challenging to use in some cases, but we're working hard to make that easier. The same in weed control. There's been an influx of biological weed control to replace some of the standard herbicides. That doesn't apply in every crop, but the industry, and us included, are working hard to do that. The third example is potato storage treatments, where the standard application was a chemical one, probably for more than 40 years. That was removed from the market because it failed its EU re-registration. And if I look today, probably more than 50% of potatoes stored in Europe now have a biological sprout suppression product applied, mainly based on plant oils, but they work. And as a result, potato storage in Europe has continued without the increased use of refrigeration. And then the final one, slug control, not a big issue every year in every country. We're having a particularly challenging year this year, particularly in Western Northern Europe because of the heavy rainfall. Again, the standard chemical control was in fact 2 different active ingredients, both removed from the market in different countries, and the replacement product is a biological one, in fact also registered for organic cropping. So my point here is there are some solutions out there. They take time to develop, they take time to get into the market, they take time to learn how to use them because they are in most cases more challenging to use. They have a different application method, but there are some things out that do fill this gap, and I think that's critical for us all to understand. This isn't a one-to-one replacement, but we certainly see biological pesticides as being a very effective gap filler to replace some of the chemical products that we're losing. And then my final slide, just to summarize where we are, I hope you've understood already in the very brief time I've tried to explain. We see these products as an essential tool, and you heard the word tool and toolbox quite a lot already, an essential tool in integrated pest management, partly to replace chemistry, partly to maintain the ability to grow crops. In some of the crops we're talking about, without biocontrol, actually, those crops lose their viability. Farmers lose the ability to grow them without those biologicals, but we need more and we need to accelerate that access. I think it's also important for the consumer to maintain what we call high quality, affordable food and matching their preferences. And overall, we're certain from the programs we've been using a reduced environmental impact. That's my quick download with a few slides, and back to you, Kristen.
Thank you so much, Mark. I think those very concrete examples will be really helpful to people.